Hi, welcome. The library moderator is going to properly welcome you, but we're going to restart that video with music, the slideshow with music. So hang tight and you'll see some of the images again if you were here right from the start.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Eugene Public Library's program on 1,000 Hopes, an art installation that we have here at the library. I know you weren't able to get all of that music. It isn't technology funny, you always plan for everything and it oddly goes all backwards, but that was a brief slideshow presentation of our 1,000 Hopes from our artist, Sara. We'd like to bring everybody in and get started.
Hi, so glad you're tuned in today. This is Sara Miura Zolbrod. I'm so glad I'm here with the panelists and moderator. I've lived in Eugene since 2000, and I grew up in Vancouver and back and forth to various parts of Japan. So I spent a few years growing up in Japan. And I have a memory from when I was a kid of in Japan, my parents took me to a shrine and we hung a strip of paper in a tree that had so many other papers in it. And that memory never left me. And a few months ago, I started thinking, wouldn't it be nice to do something like that in Eugene? And here we are today, after a month of being invited to have it be outside the Downtown Eugene Public Library. Eric, would you mind introducing yourself next?
Eric, you're on mute. It happens.
That, that tech stuff, at 52, I'm on that verge of being an elder when it comes to tech.
Eric, we are amazing, smart people, and yet clicking a button is so hard for me. I agree. Gosh golly.
Yeah, well, so, Eric with the Eugene Springfield NAACP. I'm the executive director here, and I've also just been in Eugene for since 1971 and seeing just the evolving nature of our community and those folks who have been here and been strong and been true to this idea of art and culture and identity and really place. And so I just happy to be here today. Thank you. So I will give it over to Aimee, I believe.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Yes.
I'm Aimee Yogi. Currently, I am the co-president with Christy Sakai Steiner of the Japanese American Association of Lane County. I have been here, well, I graduated from the university in 1970. So I have lived here and worked here at the University of Oregon since then. I retired in 2007. I have been active in the Asian celebration for 33 years. And the Asian Council and Asian Foundation. We also have the Obon and Taiko Festival coming up July 31st, Saturday, this year at Alton Baker Park. And we have been putting that on for 30 years. So I'm very glad to be here. Sara and I have been working on this project, and she was interested to know about the Japanese American history here. So that's what I'd like to do today. Thank you. And okay, so Maya is next.
Hi, my name is Maya Rabasa. I moved to the United States when I was just entering school age and was brought up all over the country. As a young adult, I moved to Eugene, and this month marks 25 years of being here. I came to go to the University of Oregon and stuck around. Sounds like Aimee. I sit on the board of Centro Latino Americano, but I am a former teacher who has taught at all levels from preschool through undergraduate classrooms. I'm an artist, and I spend a lot of time volunteering in our local schools. Thanks for having us today.
Oh, appreciate all of you so much. And unfortunately today, Haley K. Scott was unable to make it. It's okay, you have us and we're super awesome. Myself, I'm Angela Ocaña. I'm a queer Latina in our community, but more than that, I get to hang out at the library and have fun. I am the community services manager, and I wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge the Kalapuya land that we are on. As the University of Oregon, because we love to cite sources as librarians, the traditional indigenous homeland of the Kalapuya people, following the treaties between 1851 and 1855, the Kalapuya people were disposed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and removed forcibly to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. So I think it's always good just to take a moment and acknowledge the land that we are on. Today, we are looking at The Thousand Hopes, a library art installation. And off of that, we're going to talk about some of the history, the systemic racism that has gone through much of Oregon. We are going to start off learning a little bit more about the Thousand Hopes project from our early literacy librarian, Rachel Perry, through this fun video.
Rachel Perry, and I'm the early literacy librarian for Eugene Public Library. I heard about Sara's idea for an art installation through a Facebook group for BIPOC artists in Eugene. It's called the BIPOC Artists Collective. And Sara was interested in having an installation somewhere in the community that would be inspired by her Japanese heritage and the wishing trees that are in Japan. And when I saw that Sara was looking for people and organizations to collaborate with, I thought immediately that the library would be such a wonderful fit for her project, and it would be so amazing for us to be able to collaborate together to bring this to the community and support Sara's work. As Sara and I chatted more about her idea, we realized that May would be the perfect time for this to happen as part of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We started to make the preparations. We looked around the library space, and Sara looked at different spaces that might be a good fit for her art and a beautiful backdrop and allow for all of the community to come and participate in a safe and fun way. So you'll see here in the front of the Eugene Library, anyone can come and add a dream, a wish, a hope, or something they would like to get off of their chest and leave behind them. Anything they want to share, they can put it here and bring it together with the whole community's hopes and dreams and prayers. And we've been really touched to see all of the messages from all different ages. As a children's librarian, I love seeing the messages from children, and I wanted to read you a couple of them. Sara has been working with schools all across Eugene to bring in children's dreams and hopes, and here's one that says, honesty. This one says, I hope for kindness. Lots of people are hoping that everyone is safe during the pandemic and that everyone will be able to have vaccines, that COVID will end. This one says, I hope for shelter for everyone. Hearing these children's messages is really beautiful, and this is such a wonderful way for us to understand what's important to them, what's on their minds, and for us to share our thoughts too as adults with them. It's been great to see people interacting with the project, not only putting their own wishes and dreams up, but also reading other people's and encouraging their friends to put something up that's important to them. And we're happy that everyone can come here and share what's important to them. At the library, it's very important to us to support our BIPOC communities and to support the artist communities, especially the BIPOC artist community in Eugene. So we're happy to host Sarah's project, and we're happy to continue to support BIPOC artists and to support our community as a whole.
Thanks, Rachel. Even though I'm thanking you in a video, but we really appreciate how you worked with Sarah to help bring the whole thing together. And Sarah, hoping we can turn it over to you and just learn a little bit more about the Thousand Hopes project.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen and share a slideshow, and I'll talk our way through that. Is that sharing, Shane? Awesome. So this was in April when I posted that I was seeking volunteers on social media. Aimee Yogi was one of the first people to respond. And we met outside the library, and she brought a book, and she had written down the names. She'll explain more about these names later. But they were U of O students who in 1942, Japanese Americans who were forced to report themselves in to be sent out of state. We'll hear more from Aimee about that later, but this was actually the first time that I had ever met somebody whose own relatives were forced into the prison camps. So it was a very moving backdrop for me as I started this project. Here's Aimee on the left again, maybe the left. And well, they're both named Aimee actually, so it doesn't matter left or right. And this was another volunteer who helped prepare strips of cloths. Debbie Joy Roberts Sorg also helped prepare cloths. And here's day one, May 1st. Kyle Harder created this art hut. And it was very anticlimactic because the fence was empty, the sidewalk was quiet, and I was like, now what? It's gonna grow. I think it's gonna grow. But my son was there with me and his best friend, and they created some hopes. So the fence got a little less lonely. I want to be a football player or a scientist. And then on day one, my friend happened by, a nice coincidence, and made the fence a little less lonely yet. That's Lina. And every few days I would stop in and see if I needed to leave more markers or whatnot. And another friend coincidentally stopped by. This was Robert Boyce, and he became a volunteer later. So that was very nice. He helped hang lots of hopes later. And then the first batch came in. This is from a grade 5 class. I have a son in grade 5 as well. A lot of times I noticed that the classes would kind of become contagious with each other. And so a lot of these were on the theme of climate change. And then this is my younger son, the 7-year-old's class, their expressions. This top one in green says, "I am sad that my hamster Filford died. We think he had a stroke. It was so sad." So sweet. I really loved the spelling mistakes that kids made. Those were really sweet and tender for me. And then soon I got a big batch. I think these are from River Road Elementary School / El Camino del Rio, immersion, English, Spanish. And then this is another volunteer who came and helped hang those. And then the fence started getting less lonely and picking up steam. This is Karen Daly. And then other people who helped were Isaac Boatwright, Alito Alessi, Robert Boyce, Aimee Yogi, Debray Firehawk, and Jamie Bourgeois. It was a community effort, truly. A lot of expressions about COVID, of course, from the kids especially. And this was amazing because Karen and I had a concert the whole time we were hanging Hundreds of Hopes. In the van behind us, they were playing amplified music for the whole time. And it turned out that they were acquaintances. So this is Lucid Penguin with not the music from the slideshow, but. And then we started getting some media coverage. This was in the Register Guard pretty early on, I think after about 1 week of the project. So maybe around May 7th or so. And then KLCC also did a piece about the project. And University of Oregon journalism students put a piece on Duck TV. And then the first expression, which was world peace, got less lonely and started being surrounded by other expressions. I wish we thought of others more. And that concludes my first slideshow, but I will show more later.
Sara, you kind of mentioned some of the themes that you saw throughout, and working with children like I do, every time a kid makes a spelling mistake, I'm like, why isn't it spelled that way? That's really the way it should be spelled, right? What about this project do you think brought you a lot of joy?
Well, as a parent, one thing that comes to mind is that my 7-year-old hates writing, and he hates being assigned writing, and he just hates his homework. And why are you making me write? But amazingly, this project did inspire literacy in him. And when he heard that Aimee Yogi was going to hang 23 hopes, he wanted to be like the hopes leader. He's very competitive. And so it was so neat to see that when you come at it from a different angle and it's not being assigned by your teacher, that it made him want to write. So that was a joy, because at 7, I want him to be writing more and find an inspiration and motivation to write. So that was a personal joy. And actually, yeah, I've been reflecting on the relationship between suffering and joy and hope. And when I started researching the background of this personal blurry memory of hanging a wish or prayer in a tree in Japan when I was probably less than 10 years old, I was struck by the fact that in the omikuji tradition there, what you do is you get a fortune assigned to you from the shrine. And whether it's a positive fortune or a negative fortune, no matter what, people hang them in the tree. So I love that the tree has the magic to amplify your good fortune or your good wishes. And it also has the power, this community act, it also has the power to help you unburden a sorrow or a negative thing. And so as I invited people to express things, I invited all sides of that spectrum. And I think that we don't, the really moving ones were sometimes the really sad ones, and I'll show some slides later. But also, like, the idea of hoping, and suffering. We are sad about something because there's a flip side. We have a hope. We can see a better world or a better way, And so some of these sad expressions were actually what touched me and moved me often.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about as we move in this pandemic and in this world that we are now, how unburdening yourself, writing something down and leaving it someplace, and then maybe you're a little bit lighter when you walk. I was oddly moved by the story of the hamster. Like there's a kid out there who just is kind of like, oh, this hurts my heart. And I think you're right about that flip side of joy. So thank you so much. And I know that the library is really, you just mentioned it, the tie back into literacy and writing. And that's, from a library perspective, one of the greatest things for us is seeing how we can touch people in different ways.
Angela, can I jump in with one more? And then when I realized I had the opportunity to put together a panel, I realized that my art piece isn't a purely anti-racism art piece. It's got room for so many different types of expression, but anti-racism is definitely very dear to my heart and something that I'm extremely passionate about. And so I did, in a way, shape today's panel to touch on that to a large extent. So that's why we have the assembly of wonderful community members that we have today, and we'll hear a range from them. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually, speaking on that, we're going to pivot over to Eric. Hello, Eric. Oregon has this, really troubled past. Let's call it what it is, right? It's right. We have a history of racism, not only within our state, but in the origins of founding our own city that we live in. And so I'm so happy that you're here today to share some of Oregon's past and also some of the things you do at the NAACP. So I leave it to you, Eric.
All right. So thank you so much. And it was wonderful to hear about the formation, the creation of this project. And it's something that's dear to my heart, because the idea of words and stories and art and sharing, these are some of the most important things that I've seen in my 52 years that have lasting significance. People remember them. People consider what they mean. What does that song lyric say again? How does it reply to me, and then find meaning. And those things are important. And so thank you for having this idea of pulling this together. So I wrote down a lot of notes is what I want to do, and just go back through my notes as I was listening. And I think this idea of 1,000 hopes, that thousands of hopes through generations, is something that came to mind, and how many with the African American community and other people throughout the world, this idea of hoping for this next pasture, this next growth opportunity for learning, whatever it is. Those hopes have existed on this planet with us. And they continue to do that. And what does it take to really kind of tap into those and to refine them so that we can use them for tools and directions going forward? So the NAACP, we've been around for 109 years. And part of number one thing the NAACP has used is the aspirations, the love, the wishes, the hopes, the knowledge of right and wrong as fuel for this path forward, in this particular case, for this nation we call the United States of America, because the NAACP is speaking to this nation. And so we try to link what we're doing at the NAACP to just a human aspiration for ideas that may seem simple, but that in some way have been attached to the United States of America through its Constitution. these ideas of liberty, freedom, democracy, rights, inalienable rights. So these things pre-exist. They're being brought together and pinned in one place in the 18th century. They pre-exist that, and because they're human condition, human hopes, back part of the thousands that have existed prior to. And in fact, I always like to mention that the founding fathers, whoever they may have been, went to bed nightly with women, were surrounded by Native American people on Native American land, and surrounded by African peoples, sometimes in their household doing their personal chores. And believe me, they felt that energy. They felt the wishes and aspiration. And they heard maybe behind closed doors this idea of liberty and freedom coming from someone else prior to it being written down. And so I just want to say this is longstanding, and that history is very important. And so I'll just go on from there. But the hopes and dreams and ideals are something that this state in many ways, and our nation in many ways has benefited from these ideals, but haven't put them into play. And this state is a very good good example, as many people may know, that 1859 the state was incorporated. It was right before the Civil War, right before many states decided if they were going to continue with the Union or move on to secession, much to do with the issue of slavery and people's rights to have dignity and humanity. And so the Oregon and the leaders of Oregon, many of them, including the namesake of this county, Lane County, were secessionists and lend their power, their names to that effort. And so that reflected the Constitution, the beginning Constitution of Oregon, and it still reflects where we are today for many of our people. When I say our people, people of color, non-European people, because this issue needs to be very much pinpointed, that the European issue in relationship to other peoples of the world is very particular. We talk about slavery, we talk about colonialism, but there's also but we don't focus into the particulars about that as much as perhaps we should. But so I will stop there. But so Oregon really does have a strong history of seclusion, of racial separation, at least on the books and in the laws, as far as that we had in housing, and and redlining people and labor laws, and so you find that that you can find stories throughout Oregon of different folks who have endured to this day, and that's the lesson I guess we want to talk about, is the endurance that comes from this invisible force of love, this invisible force of aspiration, this is invisible force of community, having support for one another. And so I think that as we go forward, that's how we continue this work. And so I'll just say that Oregon most likely has lost many people who have had within them many answers and much love and aspirations that could have moved us forward. And so racism, as the county has just noted, is a public health crisis. And so if it's a public health crisis, that means it's an economic crisis. It's a crisis of the spirit, of the soul. And so racism is a hurdle towards unity as well. And I think we all need to have unity without giving up any of our identity or our special inheritance and legacy from our ancestors. But we need to share it so we can have unity and celebrate the things that we all aspire to, which I think is really just peace, balance, love, acceptance. And so these things are important. And so, and I think they're the soul of any family. They're the soul of any city, any nation. And these invisible things that we just spoke of are the things that bind us, and so we want to make sure that we are supporting them. And I think an event like this is just talking about these small gestures and these things that really have vibrational impact, because ultimately it's about our decisions, and those things aren't very physical. They're decisions that are made in an ethereal place. So what is excellence in an immaterial sense? So as we move forward, I just want to thank the community here in town for supporting the arts. We have a great town that has does support the arts. There could be more illumination of the many cultural, artistic expressions that exist in the world and locally that could further our imagination and our passions for unity and for exploration and for really looking for that brotherhood and the sisterhood that exists out there. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. You got me when you said words are powerful. The hook, line, and sinker, you're going to get a librarian every time. And you also got some love in the comments from Alito Alessi, who said, such a beautiful speaker. Wow, thank you. So many people, I think, at this time, when you talk about unity and how we reflect back to the Thousand Hopes Project and vibrational impact, that sticks with me so much. What do you think? So the NAACP, you have activists and you have volunteers and you have people who come together to work. What would you say are their hopes and their dreams that they would put out or put on Thousand Hopes fence?
Well, when you put it that way, I think folks are hoping for like capacity. They're hoping for unity. I think they would like to see like order. They would like to see process and consideration of their needs. And they would like to also see themselves as valued. And so I think those are the things that people are asking for. And it takes effort, because everyone has, in order to do these things, you have to be intentional. You can't halfway do it. You can't say, well, it may be today. You have to kind of say, well, these things matter. And when I am confronted with these issues, I need to continually stand up, even if it's easier to not. And to stand up in this sense that we're talking about is extra, because we are all, we're all working hard. We're all breathing this air. We're all dealing with our, and so to do extra does take something, and not everyone can do that, but those who can should.
Yeah, sometimes I think we go around, and maybe the pandemic's heightened this for me, but our heads are down sometimes. We walk, we go to work, we do the same thing. You turn it in, you turn it off. And it's the intentionality of looking up and helping that I think is hard for us to do. And how can we shake that, get out of that rut, help, look up, down.
Well, I think ultimately it's about self-care. Like you said earlier, I think I'm not sure who said it, but self-care and just and making that part of the routine, and just like and not make it something that's normal. So I think the narrative is important. like, and going back to why folks do things, there has to be a narrative that makes sense, and so that when you step up, so to speak, it's not really stepping up, it's just something that is part of your narrative. And so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Eric, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We are going to jump away from Eric. One of the reasons, not one of, but one of the many reasons we went through the Thousand Hopes project is we were really tying it into the Asian celebration, which we were so excited for as a library to participate. We had story times and book lists and crafts, a bunch of excited librarians dealing with kids who are like chomping at the bit to get out. And we went back a level and the Asian celebration got paused, and it broke every one of our hearts, which is why, Aimee, I'm so excited to hear you talk today, because I feel like that's a piece that I missed. So I want to turn it over to Aimee Yogi.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank Sara and the Eugene Public Library for allowing me to share this story or this bit of history today. It's not very well known, but I think it is very important for us to move forward. I want to describe the injustice that was perpetrated on Japanese Americans in Eugene in 1942. In fact, on June 3rd, 1942, almost exactly 79 years ago, all Japanese Americans were removed from Lane County. I would also like to add that memorializing, honoring, saying their names builds solidarity with everyone who has suffered injustice, and we can bring change. Out of suffering comes unity and hope. So here's the chronology of what happened in 1942. On February 19, 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which created the Western Defense Command Zone on the West Coast and assigned to the armed forces the power to remove all persons deemed a threat to national security. All persons of Japanese ancestry were slated for removal from the zone. All Japanese American residents of Lane County registered at the Civil Control Station at 34 West 6th Avenue in Eugene. That is now the site of the Holt Center. There were 3 residents, all were University of Oregon students. In fact, the university had 23 Japanese American students registered at the time. Here are their names: Chie Arai, Harry Yoshiro Fukuda, Midori Funatake, Mary Furusho, Frank Hachiya, Ted Hachiya, Thomas Hayashi, Woodrow Ishihashi, Kenji Inahara, Harold Ito, Makoto Iwashita, Grace Ikuko Kumagawa, Alice Kawasaki, Takuo Kawauchi, Samuel Teruhide Naito, Kenzo Nakagawa, Ellen Ogawa, Tadashi Osaki, Lawrence Takei, George Uchiyama, Hitoshi Kin Watanabe, Michi Yasui, Robert Shu Yasui. On March 17, Carl Onthank, who was the U of O Dean of Personnel Administration, led the effort to support the students in this forced removal. He wrote to the national YMCA and YWCA offices, the University of Washington, Cal Berkeley, the University of Colorado, and other universities.
As some students had already left to attend colleges in states outside the zone, for example, the University of Utah, he suggested an effort be made by West Coast universities to create a network of colleges who would accept our students and to facilitate the transfer of those students from the assembly centers and concentration camps. By March 19, he heard from his colleague at the University of Washington, who responded by saying that he had returned from a meeting at Berkeley, and it was a meeting of the National YMCA and YWCA and the major West Coast universities. They had created the National Japanese American Student Relocation Council. This council would survey students who wanted to transfer to other colleges and to request admission from universities outside the Western Defense Zone. By March 28th, ONTHANK assured our students that if they signed up for the transfer, the council would arrange to pick them up, whether they were at the assembly center or concentration camp. As soon as they were admitted to the new college, they would be taken to that college and set up with a small stipend for expenses. 19 of our students registered. 4 young women opted instead to join their families and support them in the concentration camps. At the time, there were an estimated 2,300 Japanese American university students in Washington, Oregon, and California. The University of Washington had 456. Berkeley had 420. UCLA had 250, and USC had 131. In May 1942, Bob Edwards wrote in the Oregon Daily Emerald a farewell to the university's Japanese American students. War affects everyone, but students of Japanese ancestry are individuals whose whole scheme of life will be affected by war conditions. It is unfortunate that the college career shall be interrupted, for many of these students of Japanese ancestry are brilliant scholars in difficult fields. On May 13, 1942, Michi Yasui was a senior. She had completed her education degree and was prepared to graduate. Graduation was May 31st. The university administration requested a waiver from the Civil Control Administration, offering all-day supervision of her on graduation day and delivery to the evacuation train. This was denied. At that point, no one knew when that evacuation order would occur. Michi went out one night because she had heard that the evacuation train from Hood River, where her family was passing through Eugene, and she stood in the dark on a hill watching for that train. It went through town. They saw her standing there, but she was not able to see them. At the urging of a brother in Denver, he recommended that she come out to Denver to live and work and complete her degree. So she left by bus before the evacuation order was put in place. She was not able to pick up her degree. So all University of Oregon students who were not Lane County residents returned to their home counties to be registered and to prepare for removal. So may we see the poster? Okay, this poster was issued in Eugene and by the Western Defense Command. And on May 23rd, 1942, all residents of Japanese ancestry in the Oregon counties of Lane, Lake, Jackson, Curry, Coos, Josephine, and the western half of Klamath County were ordered to report to Eugene or Medford to prepare for removal on June 3rd, 1942, to an unknown military destination for an unknown length of time, taking with them only what they could carry. By May 29th, the National Japanese American Student Relocation Council was established and funded by the National YMCA. The transfer of students was managed by the American Friends Service Committee. The names on the Eugene Japanese American Memorial at the Hull Center, the names are at the Eugene Japanese American Memorial at the Hull Center. We can come back to me. Okay. The memorial was dedicated on February 19, 2007. It honors the pioneers, Japanese American pioneers, the concentration camp survivors, and the heroic 442nd Regimental Combat Team. We are in the process now of adding this story of the forced removal of the Japanese American university students. This memorial brings up the connection to the Native American community and the story of support from the Grand Ronde Reservation and Spirit Mountain Casino. The costs of the memorial were of concern, so committee members reached out to Grand Ronde Reservation. They arranged for a challenge grant of $50,000, and we were able to raise the balance to build a memorial. I had the occasion to talk with Bob Tom, who has been the cultural director at Grand Ronde. And in a conversation, he said, "We share a common history." I didn't know exactly what he meant until I read The People Are Dancing Again, which is a history of the termination and restoration of the Grand Ronde Reservation. Dylan Meyer was the head of the War Relocation Authority during World War II. They were in charge of the concentration camps. His reputation consisted of the shortage of food and medical services, harsh treatment, and sanctions on civil rights in the concentration camps. After the war, he became the head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. This foretold a bad outcome for the tribes. In an effort to reduce expenses for maintaining the reservations, the BIA began a campaign of termination. Using lies and coercion, the BIA worked to get the tribes to vote for termination and freedom from federal control. The Grand Ronde tribe was terminated in 1950. That is our common history. Dylan Meyer, who provided little food and medical supplies to the concentration camps, required loyalty oaths of Americans, and isolated our dissidents, caused the termination of tribes in Western Oregon. It took 30 years to gain restoration. And our story continued as we recovered the names of our students. Bob asked for the names of the imprisoned families he saw when he was a child. He knew they were Japanese Americans from the farming community at Lake Labiche near Salem. I was able to find 179 names of Japanese Americans at an assembly center in Marion County. They are now in a place of honor. From this memory arises another commitment and connection we have for the Indigenous people today. And I will repeat the land acknowledgement statement that was given by Angela. And I borrowed this from Shannon Santiago. I recognize I am a guest in the homeland territory of the Kalapuya. I extend my respect and gratitude to the many indigenous people who call these lands home. My wish is that we recover the Kalapuya culture, worldview, words, and life here in Eugene and Lane County. So recovering this difficult time in our history awakens our activism in the pursuit of justice. It brings unity and solidarity, and together we will bring change. Thank you.
Thank you, Aimee. I'm gonna just sit with that for a second. Because I don't know that we take a moment sometimes to just sit with things. Aimee is a librarian by trade, so ish. She just works at the girl. No, I was gonna say a fancy degree don't mean you're a librarian. What's in your heart, you get to be a librarian.
Yes.
You just, yeah, exactly. It's this moment where the Thousand Hopes Project, Sara had talked about recognizing sorrow and hurt, I think, and trying to let that go. But how do we also, as a community, honor and recognize that? And how can we work towards that, I think, Aimee?
Yeah, it is very difficult. There was a time when I couldn't even look at that poster.
Yeah.
Because, that was me. However, and I'm from Hawaii, so I didn't grow up with this identity with the internment of the Japanese Americans until we found out, because we had always been told that there were too many of us in Hawaii to lock us up, right? Nothing would happen. And indeed, in 2010, we found out that 2,000 of our friends and neighbors and family members were imprisoned in a prison camp above Pearl Harbor. They had been, and no one said anything. So this was the big lie, and it just crushed us. And then we rose up, and now we are recovering the names. We are recovering the site. It is a National Park Service site now. We have interpretive history. So, right. And what happened to a lot of our young people or people that came out of the camps, they didn't, they were building their lives again, but we had a couple here in Eugene that marched on the March in Washington in 1963 with Martin Luther King, and anti-war protesters, activists. They were very, very active with the AIM movement, and today we have a very active movement with Sudu for Solidarity. This arose out of the Tule Lake survivors, 90-year-old survivors, and they were they have organized and are protesting actively the last 3 years in Texas, because the idea that the Border Patrol and ICE would separate children from their families, that would jail refugees and asylum seekers, was so abhorrent to us. And had we not suffered this, why is it happening again? So they're out there, and we just discovered that Sudu for Solidarity is even a bigger movement. We were going to do a March on Washington last year, but this coming up next year, their vision has changed and includes reparations for African Americans who have suffered from centuries of oppression. So it's very, the resilience of our just our community and the network of solidarity we're able to build makes us all safe. And that's what we wanted to do for this Asian celebration, was to make it safe for everyone to come and join us and have fun at the library. So.
I know, Aimee, we were talking about those in some of our meetings about how the library was going to help with Asian celebration. You know, we're librarians, so we're immediately like, let me make you 18 book lists. Let me tell you all about internment camps. Here we go. You turn us loose. And someone in that meeting was like, but can you talk about joy? You know, like, yes, but also let's celebrate the joy of us. And I just stepped back for a moment and was like, oh my gosh, yes. And so I think that's a piece of from the Asian celebration, as we make that up and how we celebrate joy again with our community is so very important. So thank you so much, Aimee. Appreciate it again. Powerful, moving. Thank you. We are going to pivot to our last speaker of the day. Maya, hello. Also, congratulations, by the way. You've just won your seat on the 4J District Board. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
As a youth librarian, I'm really excited to hear your take on youth in our community and our schools. And yeah, so thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. You know, since invited to participate on this panel, my mind has been flooded with many topics from which to choose to cover and directions to take when planning what I would bring to this conversation today. As a member of Centro Latino Americano's Board of Directors and an active member of Lane County's Latinx Alliance, on many occasions, racist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant transgressions and gatekeeping have been brought to my and our attention, so many that I've lost count. Additionally, as a Latina who's lived in Eugene for 25 years, I have my own personal share of experiences, and I know that I will continue to accumulate those because change, if it happens at all, is far slower than I personally would like. Finally, as an immigrant to this country from Mexico, I've lived in all corners of this country except for the Great Plains. I can assure everyone, although I think most of us are pretty well aware, that this isn't limited to Eugene, Lane County, or even Oregon. And I was tempted to list, in an effort to continue to expose example after example of atrocious and hateful behavior exhibited towards our Latinx and immigrant communities. But after visiting the 1000 Hopes Project and reading through the vast majority, if not all, of the hopes submitted, I sat there for hours, as well as watching my own family participate, from my youngest kiddo, who is 9, to my father-in-law, who is 86. I was really struck by the power of hope. I was deeply struck by how hope is irremovably linked to an understanding of injustice, of something missing, of feeling something is off or wrong. If everything feels right, there's little need for hope. Hope often comes from insecurity, the unknown, or the deeply known. But it doesn't come from stability, an experience of yielding power, true access to resources and opportunity. It comes from feeling and knowing that something is amiss. For example, this community project showed me that sometimes hope is located in something as simple, yet unquestionably important for that person expressing hope, as the desire for a furry companion, be it a dog or a cat. Sometimes it's located in the deep suffering that comes from living with debilitating long-term chronic illness. And sometimes it's rooted in generational suffering, as we've heard from Aimee and Eric, of suffering at the hands of white supremacy and institutional, systemic, and individually perpetuated racism. All of these share several things in common as I perceive them based on reading through specifically this project. They are an expression of an experience perceived or received as unjust. They share the characteristic of a sense of knowing what could make something just, but having it be just out of reach or perpetually inaccessible. They are also expressions of a desire for joy, inclusion, fulfillment, justice, wellness. They are an expression and recognition of something that our world is missing or needs more of, could be. And so because the focus of my work and passion is educational justice, I want to talk to you about a recent solution-oriented strategy that has been put in place to combat racist practices and expressions of values and their impacts that for far too long have been accepted as reasonable or even protected rights. I'm not naive. I know that public policy as a form of solution to societal challenges leaves many who work towards societal change suspicious or even cynical. But I do believe it's time to disrupt the patterns that have led these change makers to hold these feelings. I have a dear friend who communicates pretty passionately with t-shirts. She loves to make t-shirts that give a message so that you can't ignore them. They're on her shirt. And there's one that she has that is really compelling to me that says, "Policy is my love language." So as a newly elected public official, as you mentioned, elected just a few weeks ago to serve on 4J's board of directors, I want to talk specifically about a public policy that has recently taken form as an Oregon administrative rule, and then just this week enacted into law by Governor Kate Brown. A public policy that leaves me hopeful. A public policy that would not have taken shape, would not have been codified as law if there were not a need for solutions in the form of mandates and directives. I want to talk about the Every Student Belongs law, the first law of its kind in the entire nation. And I want to talk about this law specifically to bring awareness, because when change is mandated from a top-down approach, it is way too often less impactful and holds less chance of sustainability. That is, unless awareness is drawn, unless this law is put in the hands of the people, unless accountability is demanded. And the only way that can happen is if we shine attention on this policy so awareness is widespread. As a little aside, I've been inspired because I've been watching CAUSA, an organization that leads efforts in Oregon to empower our immigrant communities by ensuring these communities know their rights and tasking the greater community with a commitment to protecting these rights. CAUSA focuses their strategy for accomplishing these goals on education and outreach. Most recently, CAUSA has been hyper-focused on educating the immigrant and broader community about the change in Oregon's driver's license laws that took shape following the Oregon legislature passing Oregon House Bill 2015 about 2 years ago. A law granting all Oregonians the right to a non-commercial driver's license, driver permit, or state ID card without presenting proof of legal presence. The impacts of this law extend far beyond the obvious realm of being able to drive legally, and I'm inspired by the diligent efforts CAUSA has put forward to make sure all immigrants, and in particular Latinx immigrants, are aware of their rights so they can take advantage of walking through the proverbial doors this law opens. And so, inspired by CAUSA's leadership, I want to take advantage of this time today to celebrate and spread the word about a different policy, that everyday students belong. Every student belongs law, excuse me. That's a really hard thing to say a lot of times fast. So like most successful movements, this law originated from the impacted community expressing a need. The origin of this law is one letter written to Governor Brown and Oregon legislators. One letter written by one student sharing one person's experience, sharing one person's perspective. And from there, an inquiry into our schools made it abundantly clear that this student did not stand alone, that their experience was not unique, that there was a pattern of behavior and experiences that couldn't remain unaddressed. The student wrote to the governor to express frustration, dismay, fear, outrage, disappointment, concern over the numerous experiences they had had with hate symbols being displayed in the classroom setting. In the letter, the student delivers a call for action. They wrote, "Banning the Confederate flag is far more just an act to please some people. It shows students and educators that the state of Oregon sees them in their struggles to be considered equal and aiding in the fight against racism. Right now is a great time for Oregon to be a leader for its own citizens and throughout the United States and install this overdue policy." From here, Governor Brown tasked the Oregon Department of Education, ODE, to write an Oregon administrative rule prohibiting the display of 3 categories of hate symbols: the Confederate flag, the noose, and Nazi symbols. The administrative rule thoughtfully includes language, however, to keep open the door for revisions if other hate symbols are identified and leadership chooses to add them to the list of prohibited symbols. The administrative rule also mandates each district develop a system by which students, their families, and district staff can submit bias incidence complaints, complete with a comprehensive incidence response protocols that each district had to submit. Under the leadership of Oregon Department of Education's Deputy Director, Carmen Urbina, Eugene's own, and her team focused on educational equity and inclusion with support from Director Coltgill. The rule was thoughtfully constructed and temporarily took effect in September of 2020 and made permanent just this past February. Hard work on the part of students, many students, and Oregon legislators led to this administrative rule being introduced as House Bill 2697, successfully passed by the legislature and signed into Oregon law 2 days ago on June 3rd. Again, the first in the nation. I share this with you all today in the hopes that you will also share this monumental legislation with others. I share this with the hope that more people who are aware of this law, the more protection and safety it will afford our students and staff. The spirit of this administrative rule turned law lies in the recognition, and I quote here, I'm quoting Coltgill, that student health and safety are the cornerstone of education and that all students are entitled to a high quality educational experience free from discrimination or harassment based on perceived race, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, or national origin, and without fear or hatred, racism, or violence. All staff and leaders are also entitled to work in environments that are free from discrimination or harassment. And visitors, the families, should be able to participate in school activities without fear for their safety. End quote. So today, I'm filled with hope. Now I ask you, it's my turn for a call to action. Go spread the word because this is on all of us. Thank you.
Oh, Maya, raise it up. Let me tell the power of youth, and I get the privilege. I am so lucky. I see kids every day. I work in our teen center. The power that they hold, the passion that they hold, if we can lift their voices up, the difference they can make in our community, that they know that people support them to make a better future. That's impactful.
Yeah.
One of the things with the art installation is the power of art, just in general, right? The hope that it brings. And Sara talked about how it got her kid writing, which I love.
Right.
What do you think is the power of art within kids in our community?
I think, I want to focus my answer, I think, specifically on community-based art that's a collective endeavor. And it's in the name of that law, right? Every student belongs. It's an experience, a tangible experience that they can touch and they can look at and they can take their parents and show, I belong. And I know my father-in-law is 86 and he's like, hasn't been a student or a child in a long time. But we went by the exhibit on our way to the airport to send him back to Massachusetts where he lives. And he got in the car and he was giddy like he was 6 and not 86 and said, I feel like I'm a part of Eugene now. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. That's just, I mean, that's, to me, that's like so compelling. And we have this, you know, there's this concept of praxis, right? Which is where theory and practice meet each other. And when Sara was talking about the writing thing and not just another assignment, or I think back to my parents who had to just literally do loops and loops and loops, and it wasn't even words, but it gives students the chance to, or children or youth, the chance to put into a tangible thing, something where they're practicing a skill that we all want them to acquire, but they're also thinking deeply. They're seeing patterns, you know, I mean, there is the contagious element, but there's also the contagious element is evidence of a pattern being made, right? It's evidence of students saying, you know, the climate is important to me. And another one saying, hey, yeah, it's important to me. It's important to me. And that's a movement. And seeing students part of a movement, to me, that's exciting. And that to me feels like it holds a tremendous amount of power. And when that movement is based in hope and not, you know, kind of stagnant in like despair, because it can be really easy to become really fixed in despair. It leaves me, you know, thinking, you know, things are going to be okay.
Yeah, gives us hope, right?
Yeah.
Same thing you're talking to Eric, like
Right.
let's lift our head up a little bit and stop
Right.
the monotonous grind, and gives us hope.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Maya. I'm going to turn it over to Sara to close us out a little bit. Sara has one more PowerPoint to share with us that I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Wow, it's so moving to hear what you all are sharing. I just want to tell you how the rest of today is going to go, because I think some of the publicity said it might end at 4. We're willing to be here till 4:30. I'm going to show some more slides very shortly. And then I am going to try to show that first slideshow and hope that it works this time. And that one, I'm not going to talk over it. So that might be a great time to put any questions that you might have or comments that you might have in the chat. And then Angela might be able to tie some of those in and see if we'll have time. So I have some slideshows coming up in a moment. I did want to acknowledge that Haley, oh my gosh, Haley K. Scott, I appreciate her boundary setting. She was feeling maybe towards burned out. And she was going to provide a little bit of the Native and Indigenous perspective. But thankfully, Eric and Aimee, and probably Maya too, have all mentioned that to some extent. Shane Davis is here in the background helping with tech today, and he's going to put something in the chat. As I was trying to educate myself about Oregon's history of systemic racism, I found a really great resource. And so I urge you to check out this timeline that talks about all the different forms of often state-led racism. And it's a document called Looking Back in Order to Move Forward. And this amazing woman named Elaine Rector put it together, and she's with Coaching for Educational Equity. So in the chat, you can find the link to that. And since we weren't able to hear Haley's perspective, maybe we can go out there and those of us who don't know that much about Oregon's mistreatment of Native and Indigenous peoples, it would probably be a good way to build a better future for us to learn about that history. Okay, slideshows. Let's see some pictures. I think I'll run a slideshow that doesn't have words, and then come to a slideshow that I will narrate to as well. Shane, sorry, my screen is saying stop screen instead of share screen. I can't even click the share button.
For any of you that don't know, Shane is our background tech guy. He lives somewhere in the bowels of the building helping us whenever we have a tech conundrum. So he will help Sarah with that. I promise we pay him. He's very awesome. We don't just keep him around. And he understands technology better than I.
Okay, I think Shane has helped sort me out. Fingers crossed here. Let's go to the slideshow without words first for a few minutes. Is that sharing? Yay. It just was because it was a welcome screen. Here we go. And again, let's just let it run. This is inspired by a Japanese tradition called omikuji, which I participated in as a child in Japan. You can learn more at www.1000hopes.com. Bye! being heard? Okay, so this is a picture of the Japanese American memorial that Aimee referred to at the Halt Center. And they show this girl on a big pile of suitcases, but they weren't allowed to take that much with them. Here's a picture of the MIMS house, where I believe the NAACP does a lot of work out of. And there's an incredible historical marker here where you can learn about the terrible removal of the Black community around the ferry area.
Your streaming is not going through. There may be a...
Should I restart?
Yeah, oh, there you are.
Okay. Do we see the reparations cloth? This woman sent me a photo of her expression that she hung. It wasn't somebody that I knew. And she had decided to take it to the next level and take cloth home and then use her letter stamps to write this one up. Rachel Perry volunteered to take some photos, and on that day, a group of adults with disabilities came by, and they were touring the window front exhibitions art, and they were pleasantly surprised that there was a participatory element here. And so this was a group called Allies LLC that helps improve the daily quality of life of adults with disabilities. Zane, he's the new of the group. I met new people. I feel great. Speaking of art, not everybody wrote words, and this was definitely an intention and invitation of mine to try to be accessible for those who don't write. And I just, from this image, I kind of got the idea of like a narrow gate opening to a broader, bigger, more welcoming gate, but it's pretty abstract, so we can read what we will into it. I also on social media invited people who weren't able to come down to the site themselves to send me hopes if they wanted, or expressions. And so on the left, that we all have the courage to become who we truly are. This came all the way from Belgium. And on the right, I wish to see my right, anyway, I don't know if it's your right. I wish to see my family and friends in the US and travel freely. And that came from Canada. This was a community gathering away from the library that I went to, where I left cloths and markers. Here is the last Hoper. I showed you a picture earlier of the very first Hoper, who was Lina, who came along and wrote World Peace. And this was June 1st, so she was a day after the deadline. We were supposed to end on May 31st, but we were uninstalling on May 31st, and she happened by, and she happened to be from Japan originally, actually. So she wrote a hope in Japanese. This is a different hope. There was a few hopes written in various languages, and this is Japanese. It says, Sekai jinsei ga heiwa de aru. So this person's hoping for peace for humanity. Oh, okay. So I'm kind of getting close to wrapping down, but people always ask me what's next with this project. And there are going to be probably, I'm hoping that it will keep cycling onwards at the Obon Festival and Oregon Asian Celebration that Aimee mentioned. There's going to be a collaboration with them and a bamboo wishing tree there. And I'm hoping to get Yoko Ono's attention. She has been a very inspiring artist to me. And of course, because of her famous husband, John Lennon, her own artwork is sometimes overshadowed, but she was recognized as the co-writer of Imagine, the song Imagine, a year or two ago. And she has this incredible peace tower. It's called the Imagine Peace Tower. I think it's in a Scandinavian country. And I would love somebody to introduce me to Yoko Ono and help me get her ear. And let's do a 1,000 hopes over there at Yoko Ono's Imagine Peace Tower, or 10,000 hopes. Oh, and here is the deinstall shot by Rachel Perry. Done with the help of several volunteers. And then I have a bit of a PS here. Oh, why did that go by? So within minutes of us taking, within minutes of us taking the piece down, over there, you can see a houseless person finding a comfortable spot to rest, which reminds me that one of the themes, recurring themes, was that many people wished for safe housing or homes for all. And also, oh, here's a closer up picture of him. I had a lot of interesting, wonderful interactions when I was tending the site and adding hopes. And this is a houseless couple that was going by. And the gentleman was just beaming with love for his partner. And we were chatting and I said, what a blessing that you can spend the day with your loved one. And he said, the day, how about our whole lives? And I asked, how long have you been engaged? And he said, just 3 weeks. So celebrating love there.
Wonderful. So we don't have any comments in chat, believe it or not. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Sara. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Aimee, Centro Latino Americano, the NAACP, the Asian celebration, our friends at Cultural Services who helped us as well. And I invite our audience to take a moment, pause, think about how we can work towards unity, how we can acknowledge sorrow, how we can work towards hope. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.